right.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Merci à tout le monde d'être ici avec nous ce soir. This is something very exciting for us to see a turnout like this. This is an event that we do regularly for the community and for the health tech ecosystem and the MedTech ecosystem in Montreal and in Quebec. And it's never in a typical location. So as you see, we're in a beautiful, beautiful church in Montreal. And the reason is specific, so it's not random. Notre ville, diverse, stimulante, ça fait partie de notre patrimoine et ça rejoint l'ancien avec le nouveau. C'est une église qui date de 160 ans et l'emplacement directement à côté d'un centre d'innovation, so right next to UQAM, Life Sciences Innovation Building, and at the top of Place des Arts, a cultural hub in Montreal, and linking a little bit of old and new, and perhaps symbolic of Montreal's role in the transformation of healthcare and how we're moving into a new phase of emerging technology and Montreal and Quebec taking its place in that. So we're really, really excited. We're very happy to see such a turnout and to have you here with us, and also to have this amazing guest with us today that some of you know from the field, and if you don't know, you're going to meet, and hopefully you're going to know for the rest of your careers. But I will quickly introduce Ela Borenstein, who has over 25 years in our field, 20 years as a senior executive in biopharma, biotech, and medical device companies, roles like clinical affairs, regulatory affairs, product strategy, part of an IPO at one point in your industry career, in MedTech, biopharma, therapeutics.
Yeah, I like combination products.
The most complex by
Yes.
far.
Yeah, where you get a little bit of everything.
And in 2007, you joined the BDC. I think you
Correct.
spent just under 10 years as an investor.
That's right.
And since then, VP leading the Venture Cap Incentive Program. And am I right in saying managing funds totaling $1.8 billion?
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So needless to say, this is an amazingly experienced and wonderful professional in our field. Please join me in welcoming Ela Borenstein, everybody.
Thank you. Mark is very generous. I'm not that old, but I've done a lot, so we're trying to figure out how that happened.
That's at this stage of the career when I introduce people, then I say, should I say over 25 or should I say? But the career started in the late teens back in the day.
That's right, I was young.
That's right. That's right. So
Actually, surprisingly, it started in the pharmaceutical company's dispensary where I used to count Valium by the hundreds. And there's a bowl of Valium at the back there, which you guys might need after this talk. I don't know.
Disclaimer, BML is not providing the volume. So Ela, let's jump right in.
Sure. Actually, Mark, do you mind?
No, not at all.
Okay. So can I just show of hands, who here works for a startup company? And who here is raising capital? And who here has been raising capital for more than 3 years? Thank you. That's very helpful.
Fair. Yeah. I didn't know this, but I learned it, that the BDC is not directly investing in biotech and medtech for the last 5 years or so, mostly managed by Amplitude Ventures at this point, and also impact with funds at CTI, Genesis, Lumira. Can I ask you, why is that? Should we be thinking about that? Should we know why that is? And what are the consequences and what is kind of the trickle down and the ripple effect through the community because of that decision?
So BDC makes decisions to support the industry in different ways. And when I was investing in healthcare life sciences with my partners, who are now actually co-founders of Amplitude, many of you may know Jean-François Parizeau and Dion Madsen. And so the three of us were investing together. And it was decided that for the BDC dollar to have the greatest impact, there was a desire to crowd in private sector capital and have BDC be a cornerstone investor for a new life sciences healthcare fund. Hugely important for the ecosystem. At that time, there was not a new fund domiciled in Canada within the previous 10 years. The exception was Quark Ventures, which is a Chinese fund that invests in late stage, and Versant Ventures, who came to Canada as a spin-out from the US fund. No new Canadian VCs in healthcare life sciences. So we thought, as an industry, you need new blood, you need to emerge new funds, and they need to attract more capital other than BDC. That was the rationale, and frankly, I supported it completely. I decided to stay inside BDC and do, seek out other opportunities, and they went and they raised a fund, and frankly, are really successful in having raised now a second fund. So the pilot project worked. The experiment is doing well. And we've asked Amplitude to manage out our portfolio. Consequently, BDC doesn't have a direct investing fund. We do invest in healthcare and support the healthcare ecosystem by, as you said, investing in other funds like CTI, Genesis, Lumira. It's a short list, isn't it?
Those are the three that I dug up.
It's a fairly short list.
I didn't have a fourth.
I know that we're here with Pender Ventures, healthcare IT fund. That's 50% healthcare IT and 50% IT. And Miriam, where are you? So people can tug on your. There you go. If you're looking for capital in your healthcare IT startup, go see Miriam. And so. So we invest in Pender through a program I manage called Venture Capital Catalyst Initiative, Vicky. And so there is a life sciences component there.
And the reach that you have through these partners,
Yes.
Are you still in the loop on the details, and not just the deals and the cells in the spreadsheet, but the work that's being done, the type of companies that are being funded? How involved are you, and how much exposure do you have
So
on
as part of the mandate to support the government and different government initiatives, BDC and my team look at gaps in the market. And healthcare, life sciences, biologics, as well as MedTech and healthcare IT, if you want to put it all under one umbrella, we are undercapitalized in Canada. So there is still continues to be a need for new funds and new capital to come into that asset class. BDC, frankly, I've been pounding the pulpit. Hey, pretty good venue for that.
Yes.
Okay, so I've been
Great
pounding
pun.
the pulpit for the last 5 years, saying that even though Amplitude spun out, it doesn't necessarily mean there's still not a need for a BDC fund. And I'm quite encouraged to finally have some indication that we might be back in that world in the next 18 to 24 months. It takes time. We have a lot of initiatives. BDC is a very active investor, probably the most active investor in the country, and we do deep tech, and we do Internet of Things and industrial innovation and women in technology. So lots of different applications for where we can invest our capital, and I'm hoping to see it in the sector again very soon.
But it's interesting you say, I was about to ask you, are MedTech startups in Canada well supported by the ecosystem and by the financial infrastructure? And you're beating me to the punch and saying no.
It's a big no. So I think there's a lot more innovation than we have capital. I also think there's a lot more innovation than we have actually seasoned, experienced entrepreneurs. It's a young industry. A lot of folks haven't been able to. Steve sitting front row, he and a few others I can count on two hands have been able to see a product from its nascent innovation right through to the market and value creation. So it's still a very young industry, and it takes a long time to get this done. It's really hard. Have we removed all sharp objects from the back of the room? Because it is hard, and those of you who are looking for capital, the headwinds are there right now. It's a really tough time to raise capital in any sector. And unfortunately, MedTech tends to be one of the last places investors tend to put their money, not just in this country, but because we don't have a lot of capital, it feels like there's a real retraction of capital, if there ever was any, but also a drought. It's really tough times now. Steve, I called your name out, so yes, please, go ahead. So for,
Is this on?
I'm assuming everybody in this room
Does
knows.
everybody know Steve Arliss?
Yeah, okay.
So Steve Arliss is one of our most successful MedTech entrepreneurs. I don't think I need to say your resume, Steve, but I'm happy that you're here
Yeah.
and for you to share in the discussion as well.
Yeah, well, it's only because you begged me, Mark, that I'm here. Just kidding,
I
just
thought you
kidding.
wanted to
True.
see me.
Just kidding.
That's not true.
I just wanted to add a little bit of color to what you've been saying, Ela. And going back to my first startup, CryoCap, which was my biggest one as well.
You put Quebec on the map with that one.
I look back and I say, what was it that springboarded me to success? And it was because I had the naivety to think I could go to the States and raise money. Because if I had relied on just Canadian VC money at the time, CryoCap and the 1,250 employees in Kirkland, Quebec, would not be here now. Okay? So we have to be careful when we say that there's not enough capital here, because we should also be confident enough to go and reach out and get some American VC money that is often more deep-pocketed.
Listen, Steve, no, it's great. And
I'm sorry, Mark, if I've been adding up.
No, on the contrary, you've shown the roadmap. You've actually executed it. And for Ela representing the BDC, saying that we're undercapitalized in the country, and at the same time saying not only that it's nascent, but the innovation is flourishing, and we know that.
Yeah.
There are reasons why, because we have great engineers, we have great university health networks that collaborate well, and transfer innovation well, and we have an SR&ED program that really encourages it.
Yeah.
It's working, but to say that it's undercapitalized, to have one of our biggest medtech entrepreneurs and one of our biggest funding sources in the country saying it's undercapitalized, at the same time the fact that it's nascent and it's growing is great. My question was going to be, is it nascent and strong, or is it frail and delicate?
Well, I think there is a fragility, okay, but frail implies an absence of robustness. You can still be fragile, but thriving in the right direction, which is up and to the right. I actually agree completely with what Steve said. The issue is you need, typically, if I were to provide a optimal scenario for a medtech company in Canada, get a local champion, get capital here because it tends to be friendlier and it tends to understand your business. Bring it to a place where there's a clear value proposition, and then bring that entire package to a curated, proper potential supporter outside of the country with more capital. Okay, you can't do 150 cold calls. It doesn't work that way. But people like to make money with people they've made money before. And so if you can get a champion in your corner that can open a door for you, that's invaluable. And if they want shares, give them shares, because it's okay to share if the potential is there for a bigger piece of the pie. But you typically need to start in your own backyard. If you don't have the support in your own backyard, our friends in the US are going to look at it and say, well, why aren't the Canadians there? Like, what do they know that I don't know, right? So you do need to play that really carefully, and you need to approach the Canadian investor, whether it's an angel like Steve Arliss, or whether it's an institution like BDC or Amplitude or Investissement Québec or Pender. you need to approach it with a clear story of how you're going to help their investment create value, right? If I love your product, and we have some folks here who I've invested in, if I like your product and I want to invest in you, and I take that back to my team, I then am competing for the same dollars that everyone else is looking to invest, right? So you need to understand you have to help the investor who does like what you're doing sell the story to their partners so that things can move forward.
That is a phenomenal piece of practical advice. I was saying we're saying a lot of the problems, or challenges I should say, and to have a piece of practical advice like that as a solution, I think is phenomenal. I was going to say that we did look at the Pender report. You looked this way when you said Pender. I don't know where
Marianne.
Where is she? So the 2023 Pender report was really packed with information. We relied on it when preparing for this discussion. So Miriam, thank you. And we also dug up the CVCA, the Canadian Venture Capital Association annual report, and we were really pleased to see, back not that long ago, 2016, we were looking between pharma and therapeutics and MedTech. It was really 80-20 in terms of investment dollars, percentage of investment in the country, and last year was 50-50.
Really?
Yeah.
That actually comes as a surprise.
Is a surprise. It was a surprise to us as well.
Yeah.
So we know that investing in medtech is very risky. I mean, we're on the ground floor, and we work with it. We've worked with it all our careers. It's so much more than tech. It's about the clinical integration. It's about the regulatory is not even the biggest challenge. What would you say is the biggest one, and how can we help de-risk it?
So I've done both. And when I look to invest by allocation or support a company, I have to think about not just this investment, but the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And what's the overall investment, and what's the likelihood of getting a return on that capital? And then I have to compare it to the other opportunities. Our team compares it to the other opportunities because we only have limited capital to invest. The challenge I find when I'm looking at a medtech investment is the technology challenges tend to be quite binary. Like either you get a good prototype or you don't, you iterate a few times, and eventually you either can move this thing forward or the hypothesis doesn't work. You can do that with not a lot of capital relative to some other sectors. When you look at a biotech type product, pharma product, therapeutic, it's clear what's the stage, how much, what do you need, how do you get value creation, and each step mitigates the risk going forward. We know this. You start off with 800 products, you end up with 3 at the end. Everybody knows at each stage it helps you identify the winner. In the field of medtech, once you have a working prototype and you go and get your data, the biggest hurdle, the biggest challenge is market adoption. And that's where you need the money, that's where you need the capital, and that's where you need the conviction of the compelling data that'll prove out your pharmacoeconomic hypothesis. And until that time, there's not a lot of insight into how your development is risk mitigating. And that's hard as an investor to continue to put money in when the risk profile is not more clear. And what we've seen effective in the past is you continue to do that. You work, your first market study is a $20,000 study. The second one should be a $50,000 study. The third one should be $150,000, because you need to get to those critical questions: is the patient, is the physician, is the payer, are they all going to buy into this story? And building out the prototype and developing the technology doesn't answer those questions. It's only when you get your data and the data package if you know you've hit the targets. So the more you know about what they need, what they're looking for, and what those key indicators should look like, the easier it is for your investors to stay committed to the project with you.
If I could add just one thing to that, Ela, and my students, my followers, and my not so great followers have heard me time and time again talk about risk mitigation, and it has to go beyond the borders of Canada.
Yes.
Because the Canadian market is very risky. It's 10 separate buyers, and you never know which way they're going to fly. You got to get into the States sooner rather. And the trick is getting a key opinion leader from the U.S. to buy into what you have. Yep. And once you have that, a big part of the risk goes away. Would you agree?
Yes. You absolutely need that support and that insight. And you may get it from a key opinion leader who's 2 steps away from the actual patient and user as your first one, who then, with their commitment to your plan, they can go and then attract the others. And that's how we see it grow and evolve. You typically cannot get all of that in your first step. But what you want to do is say to your investor, this is the plan. This is how we're going to do it. And this is where we see we're going to get the answers that you're looking for. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. One of the really interesting trends we saw at one point when we were looking at investing was virtual colonoscopies. Right, and it was all about, not having to take the same kind of medication and not having to be anesthetized and quick in and out. And we thought this is going to be great for everybody, right? More patients, doctors are going to like it, and we saw that trend disappear because doctors who were trying it said, no, you know what? I don't like it. I want more time with my patients. I'm actually thinking that instead of one 10-minute visit, I should give them one 45-minute visit and get it all done at the one time. So the market was changing. The patient journey was changing, and you need to understand your patient's journey if you're going to enter into that market. I will double down on what Steve said. If somebody comes to me and says, we have an opportunity that is only going to service the public sector healthcare industry, that's likely not an investable opportunity.
Isn't that something?
It has to target a large market, and a large uniform market is the best option.
Yeah. You know what, just to add to that, it's been my experience, and I've marketed and introduced 7 new technologies both north and south of the border. And it's not only the uncertainty of reimbursement and of adoption, because it changes from province to province up here, but things are more standardized down there. But it's also about the concept of clear, transparent reimbursement models. Okay, I can go down to the USA, and if I am exploring a certain product, I can look at it, I can identify intended uses, and then I can go online, no charge, and I can get a wealth of information on reimbursement, which is a big issue in MedTech. And that doesn't exist up here. It doesn't exist.
And I'm hearing some key things. So, in terms of the technology adoption, we talk about KOLs and the real world experience of integrating the tech. And sometimes it's the exact, you learn the exact opposite of what you thought going in. Your assumptions are flipped 100%. That cannot be understated, I think. And then on the investment side, the same concept, analogous of a champion on the investing team, and the same theme seems to be coming up, that once you find that one person that is not only understanding the tech, ready to embark on the journey with you, which is not always easy and long and painful, but also that is connected enough and ready enough to spread that through the community, in the investment community, and then analogous in the clinical community. I think those are phenomenal piece of advice. I have a question actually for everybody, because you guys are stimulating this, but of the fundraising startups right now, hands up again, please, if you don't mind, the same folks. How many of you are paying for market research? Okay, so you talked about 3 rounds of market research. Okay, and how many of you are exploring reimbursement in the US? Okay, good. So a bit of a disconnect there on the, because I see the same pitches, Ela, and the market segments and breakdowns and addressable market analyses and the go-to-market numbers are really not based on fundamental research, aren't they?
No, and I think when you're first starting out, nobody's expecting you to make a big financial commitment. And I think if you can get some support in that research, it would be great. But you need to have some sense that there is a gap in the market, and the market's ready to adopt. And again, not necessarily the Canadian market. It has to, think about this without borders. I mean, I've had investors come in and say, we've got a great solution for our hospitals here in Sherbrooke. And then when we're successful, we'll take it to Montreal. And if we're really successful, we'll go to Ontario. And as an investor, that's a really, I commend that work, but it's not venture backable. And I think there are other ways to get those products to patients, and maybe there's a great need, but it's not a venture-backable business.
That's an amazing piece of insight, Ela. That's going to be a highlight of the evening for sure.
When we invest, and if I can suggest, you need to think a little bit what your investor is thinking. And I'm happy to share that, because what I think is what I say. And I'm looking at the opportunity and I'm thinking, how much is it going to cost to get to where we need it to go so that I can actually get my money out in a multiple? That's my job. And frankly, as a developer of drugs and MedTech in the past, I really appreciate all that it takes to get this done. But now as an investor, the equation has shifted, and I have an obligation, a fiduciary obligation, to return the best capital I can. And dollars in venture capital are competing on so many levels, particularly in Canada, where there are finite limits. So if I'm investing in a fund, do I invest in a fund that's doing healthcare, biotech, or medtech, or do I invest in a fund that's doing IT, where maybe the pizza app gets the pizza delivered faster and with better melted cheese, but I can get a return of 3 times my money in 4 years, versus healthcare, where I can maybe get a return on my money, but it's going to take longer. And I don't have a way to measure the progress as clearly, as cleanly, until we get to those certain important milestones. So you need an investor in MedTech that understands your business. And even if somebody is prepared to give you capital, you need to think long and hard if they're the right partner. Are they going to understand that it's taking you longer? Or are they going to want to get their money out in a pizza app horizon? That doesn't work.
Or will they not be there in the future rounds when you really need them, and will they not support the long-term mission?
Syndicate misalignment is one of the biggest killers of companies.
Wow.
And that and investing in couples, but that's another
That's another story. It's a virtual colonoscopy, in a sense. I was holding on to that one.
It's a good one.
I was going to say, and you keep segueing into my questions, which is great, Ela. My next one was going to be, what does a win look like then? What does a win look like for a medtech investment? Something you said to me yesterday was a surprise to me as well, that from where you're sitting, a biotech investment, a therapeutic, is actually less risky than medical device in certain cases. I was really surprised to hear that. I've been in medical device my whole career, and we always look at pharma as, expensive and long, and where our timelines are 5 to 8 years, in the class 2 range, at 10, 12 years in the class 3 range. Pharma's 15 to 18 years, 20 years in development, millions of dollars, billions of dollars, clinical trials. How is, why is medtech so risky, and what can we do to help manage that better?
So you're talking about a time frame from bench to market.
Of course.
As an investor, I can get out of a good pharma deal at proof of concept.
Well, that's the answer, isn't it?
Right.
That there is no intermediate step in medtech.
MedTech, you are.
It's certainly not a pilot study.
You have to have blind faith for quite some time, and that's okay, and that's good. But the biggest hurdle and challenge is your go-to-market strategy. That's why I believe that having as much insight as possible as to how you're going to do it and why there's going to be a pull, because you can't push product. It has to be pulled.
Absolutely has to.
Right? So the market has to pull it. They need to want it. You need to speak to the electrophysiologist who's going to be in the EP lab, and he's going to want to use your product instead of current standard of care. So you need that to be the compelling story. And
it's harder than finding an unmet clinical need, because it is fundamental to base new technology on unmet clinical needs, and we've learned that from the ground up.
Right.
But it's more than that, isn't it? It's also an adoptable technology that has the right market opportunity and that's pulled. Not pushed.
So
right?
It has to be pulled. It has to fit through the door. There has to be space for it. Believe it or not, we have seen historically as investors, there's a lot of dead bodies out there, and some of them, the product never fit into the door of the lab. I mean, these sound like silly things, but you need to think about that. And sometimes, unless you're actually willing to think about the user, the payer, the patient, and the prescriber.
How the technology will actually be used in a
Correct.
clinical setting is not the same as how well it performs
Correct.
in a clinical trial on the bench, and that's a very different challenge in medtech. How, with all of this, and there have been some phenomenal insights, there's a lot of people in the room looking at this from different perspectives, even though we're all interrelated, right? So there's startup founders here, there are ecosystem stakeholders like accelerators, there are banks here, there's federal and provincial government here tonight, and there are investors, of course. How, as an ecosystem, can we collaborate better and help, all of these issues that we're talking about today? Where can we put our energies, and how can we do better?
So I think we need time and money, right? I mean, motherhood and apple pie, right? So, but time is important, because the life cycle that we're going through, we have not had innovation in healthcare, in life sciences, in Canada before 30 years ago.
Were you going to say a number? I was going to say.
Yeah, 30 years ago, there was virtually no real innovation in an applicable technology, and that's because of regulation, right? I mean, there was compulsory licensing. So you just for the biopharma world, every one of our pharmaceutical companies was a sales and marketing subsidiary.
Wouldn't you say, Ela, cost of change is a bigger hurdle? Cost of change. I mean, decommissioning and reintegrating and retraining and new technology as opposed.
No, I think we need patience. This is a long life cycle, and I think what happens is you have, a few shining stars that have shown it can be done from Canada. we can get the attention of the American dollars, and we can bring an important product to market, but we don't have many, and we need time to build up that nucleus of success. And in spite of everything I've just said, I'm extremely optimistic. I think we have a lot of the ingredients to get it done. What we do need is committed investors. BDC, I believe, should be one, and I'm hoping that we'll get back into that. We are also supporting, as I said, other fund managers. So, but it's still a very challenging environment, but we need to keep our heads down and put our shoulders to the wheel, because it can get done.
Well,
If I can add something, if I may,
please, yeah,
Mark.
of course.
30 years ago, the reason why there was no innovation in MedTech is that there were no entrepreneurs, okay? And entrepreneurs, good ones, were a rarity, as Ela said. Today, I've seen a vast change in the last 10 years, and the interest of young graduates, young people, wanting to really become entrepreneurs in the medtech space. And they don't know what's facing them, but they're willing, they think it's going to be easier and faster than pharma. And
It's not.
if I can just say one last thing, I think what we lack in MedTech is an understanding of the milestones that Big Pharma has already figured out. What are the milestones that tell me that I'm on the right track? Okay?
Exactly.
But we don't have those milestones.
So you're right. I think that's what I was trying to explain. And so what you need to do instead is continue to grow your circle of people that believe what you're doing is important. And that's why, whether it's a marketing study or the champion who then brings in other champions who bring in other champions, as you build out the concentrics of support. Me, as an investor, I'm sitting near the middle, right? The center of that. And as I see that grow, it encourages me to continue to support you. But
Well,
if
you know,
I
but
don't
Exactly.
see that
Well,
growth,
Steve, you're sitting-
that's going to be a problem.
This is wonderful. You're sitting in a spot to be able to influence that, and you're in one of the best run programs in the province. And that's maybe something that we can start talking about practically, is how do we get these incremental milestones?
I completely agree. And one of the things that I've learned as well in the last, I've been in the MedTech startup space 2-3 years, a couple of years, is that proof of concept, first in human, I almost said man, thank God I got corrected myself there.
We'll edit that out, Steve.
First in human is very important to really get right, okay? And the best way to get them right is by bringing in seasoned KOLs that have been part of the innovation process in MedTech. So when I want to get guidance and feedback about my first-in-man protocol, first-in-human protocol, I talk to an American KOL who's done it several times before and who knows what's going to work with the American market.
Well, it's a phenomenal piece of insight, and we appreciate you joining in, Steve. And for somebody with your pedigree to be saying that it's a great time right now to be doing what we're doing, and for you, Ela, sitting in a senior position in Canada's biggest investing outfit, saying that you're optimistic, is certainly encouraging. So, Thank you for the wonderful discussion. We're going to open the floor now. You've got Steve Arliss here, but mainly Ela Borenstein is ready to take your questions. And if you're happy to keep the discussion going, please do so.
Thanks for your insights about your investment strategy, and I think the comparison to the pizza app and what's your exit for that compared to MedTech is a real one for deep-pocketed investors. And what we've seen, we do investments in MedTech as well, and we were curious about there's a perceived risk. We're involved in hardware design, and there's a perceived risk of hardware is hard, right? But there's also a moat there. And so we wanted to look at whether or not that data was true. Are hardware startups less successful than software startups or MedTech startups or consumer product startups? And what we found was that was not the case, and that device startups were actually much less risky, or maybe a longer exit term, but overall less risky. I was just wondering if you'd had similar sources of data, or how you research that as a deep-pocketed investor or someone who's got that fiduciary responsibility to give a return.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. And I think there is a lot of history, and we do have access to data that we pay for, that we do scrub to try to get those types of answers. I think hardware has a different risk profile. And when I talk about risk, it's not about technical risk, right? It's about refinancing risk and time to the next value-creating event, because time is against you. And so when you look at all of that, and when you analyze the opportunity, I'm sure you do this as well, you look at the hard quantitative elements, but also the qualitative elements that can derail you. And it's about the team dynamics and the founder risks, and as well. What Canada suffers from in those types of opportunities is an absence of corporate talent. Because if you have the folks from Medtronics come into your startup, they have experience and they've seen things in that a lot of our entrepreneurs just yet haven't experienced. So having that learning, that takes time to in an ecosystem to build up that depth of talent and experience. So time is unfortunately something that we have to continue to tackle and try to build up that robustness. And when we say we look to the U.S., it's not the U.S., it's the experience, right? So if you have a Canadian domiciled, West Island person who's spent 10 years in, Switzerland, that's the kind of person that would also bring a lot of important insight into the development. So mitigating risk, when I look at it, it's all of those different elements. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Dylan. And we work a lot in software, and the balance of challenge in hardware and challenge in software is changing now because of all the accessibility and cybersecurity and data privacy has changed the burden on software development and in medical device.
So I actually think there's been a significant incremental change in the ecosystem over the last 4 years. I think the willingness to embrace technology in health is far greater today than it was pre-COVID.
Well, that's great to hear, because investment macro is down, understandably, from 2021, but it's interesting to hear you say that specifically.
So I like to be a counter-cycle investor. When everyone's investing, I don't like to invest. It's it's too expensive, it's frothy, and everything's out there. As an investor, it's when there's really the opportunity to eliminate all the noise and see really what's the value proposition. That's when I like to invest. And frankly, those are the vintages that do well in investing.
So are you saying now's a great time?
Yeah. But it
That's
takes
exciting.
courage. It takes courage to
exciting,
be
yeah.
a counter-cyclical investor. And I think we have a really terrific venture capital community in Canada, but there are not a lot of really seasoned investors out there because we're still young. I define an emerging fund manager as, fund 3 or less. If you go and take a look at who invests in healthcare, less than 5 have more than fund 3 in Canada.
Isn't that it? Yeah. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. But I think the key, the key you opened with is to build that Canadian team and then go, where there's other parties with deeper pockets that can help. But without the Canadian team, it's impossible. So there's a strategy there, I think. And Marcel is listening very closely. Okay. We have time for 2 more questions.
So in past couple of, I would say 1 or 2 years, we have seen like real revolution in terms of AI.
Yes.
And I just want to know like how investors look at the AI landscape when it comes to investing in health.
No, that's a terrific question.
AI isn't risky at all.
Yeah. So, well, it's interesting because what we saw AI opportunities 10 years ago.
Of course.
And the issue was, I actually would have an investor from IT and an investor from healthcare, and they'd never spoke. There was never any convergence of interest or alignment. And now what we're finally seeing is the opportunities where entrepreneurs are saying, okay, I'm a tech guy, so I need to talk to a physician. I had tech guys come into our office who never talked to a physician about their healthcare products. It just made no sense to me, right? And similarly, I'd have healthcare guys come in and talk about, this wonderful algorithm, but they had zero
Understanding
IT
of the tech.
comprehension. Yeah. So finally, those communities are collaborating, and I think that's going to really see an acceleration in these types of products.
That's certainly exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
And Matthew from BDO.
First, I just want to say thank you, Ella. It's been a pleasure listening to your insights. I don't think people realize how much experience you have and how valuable what you say. Thank you so much for that. For the young companies here who are looking at a certain time frame to get to commercialization and build that business, and they're thinking, okay, when I'm raising money, and someone says, well, do you want to do a price round? Do you want to kick it down? What advice would you have as they start to talk to investors and they throw out their terms that you and I know, is it convertible? Is it non-dilutive or dilutive? What's your best advice for that in seeing the long road?
What a terrific
That's a great
question.
yeah.
Can we turn off the video?
We'll edit that.
We'll
edit it out.
this out. Penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You're in this for the long run. Go with someone who's aligned with your thinking. If things are going to go well, there's going to be hopefully plenty to share, and you want to be with somebody who respects your contribution to this. There are ESOP plans, there's re-up, there's all kinds of things that can happen once you've proven out a little bit of your theory, right? And so you don't want to this is a relationship, right? When you get into a relationship, do you keep separate bank accounts or do you keep the same bank account, right? Everybody's going to have something to say about the finances and where things get pulled. It has to make sense for all parties. So if you're dealing with an investor who doesn't appreciate or understand, or if you feel there's no acknowledgement of what your needs are, that's not a good relationship. But don't be, in my opinion, don't be negotiating the small stuff. I try not to.
For those of you who are paying attention, we heard that before. It's come up in these discussions before. You remember. And I appreciate you saying that, because it's
but
not.
It's tough,
also not.
But
it's also
tough,
not intuitive.
right? And again, keep in mind, So I said that, but keep in mind what the investor needs, because they have to go back and pitch this deal against other deals. So it also has to make sense in that respect. So if your investor has certain needs so that they can get the deal done, you need to be aware of that as well.
I found, going back to my first startup, CryoCath, that despite my naivety and despite my inexperience, I was fortunate enough to attract a couple of American VCs early on that asked me the right questions. When I approach a VC who wants to know when is the first sale, I turn around and I run the other way.
The wrong conversation, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so to the young entrepreneurs in the room here, be attentive to what questions are being asked of you. And if they're the wrong questions, they ain't going to change after the money's in the bank.
How do you know if they're the wrong questions, right? I hear them over
Well,
and over
come
and over.
on.
I hear the same ones over and over.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know what's right and what's wrong in MedTech. I'll wring your necks if you don't answer that the right way.
Some wonderful insights. We're gonna close it off. Ela, any final thoughts?
So I think what you do is, I can stand in awe of entrepreneurs who are committed to give everything they can to help develop what it is they're trying to do, and I really have a great deal of respect for that. And I know there's a lot of success where you hear the person on stage saying, I didn't listen to everyone who told me no, and that's why I'm successful. And that is true, but sometimes listen. Find yourself trusted advisors, and it could be your investor, it could maybe be a KOL, but listen to what they're saying. Don't be blind about nobody's baby is ugly, okay? And yet
some babies are ugly.
So listen and try to understand, is this person aligned with me or misaligned? Right. And if they're aligned, then trust what they're saying and take it as, sometimes you have to stop, okay? But when you don't have to stop, you'll find that champion who's going to go in there for the journey with you, and there's nothing better. So I wish you all luck. I'm happy to, like I said, we don't invest, but if you want to reach out, I'm happy to get a coffee or a few minutes on a Zoom call with you.
That's phenomenal. Ela, please join me in thanking Ela Borenstein. Please stick around. The bar is still open. We'll probably be here for another half hour. You can come.
How do we clone you?
How do we clone you?
Thank you all.
Science has answered that question, Steve. But that's for another day. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for coming.